Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 246 just ramped things up with the battle of Sukuna and dropping a major tease that I'm not too sure many people saw coming, which is that Sukuna has identified Higurama as being someone with the potential to match Gojo because of how quickly he's grown as a Jujutsu sorcerer in this short period of time, which somewhere there are probably Gojo fans throwing up their fists in the air because last week Hikari gets stated to be above Gojo and Sukuna in terms of his reverse curse technique. Granted, he likely hit the jackpot off screen, and now Higurama is being stated to have matched Gojo in talent. Our boy Gojo isn't beating these fraud allegations anytime soon if he keeps this up, but with that being said, let's back things up and let's dive into the recap review itself. So we open up where the last chapter left off. Sukuna has been found guilty by judgment. Higurama has the executioner's blade, and Sukuna, due to a loophole in Higurama's domain expansion, was still able to use his curse technique to attack him. Due to Kusakabe coming in clutch, Higurama has managed to stay alive, and we learn that the only reason Kusakabe wasn't immediately killed off like Kashimo or cut in half like Gojo isn't because he suddenly scales over both of those guys in durability, which that would have broken the power scaling in Jujutsu Kaisen in a way that could never actually recover, but instead it's because Kusakabe is able to use his simple domain in the process, which allowed for the slashes to be weakened to a point where it minimizes the damage that's being dished out. This actually leads to Sukuna filling in some of the blanks, not just for himself, but also for we as the audience, i.e. we as the readers, by clarifying something that we as the audience have all suspected to be the case, but now we know for certain. During that 1 month break between the events that occurred before Gojo versus Sukuna took place, there was some serious leveling up done in terms of training to a point that this might be one of Shonen Jump's most insane power creep for some of these side characters, because this version of Sukuna, even while weakened, he's still really strong. Kusakabe getting to a point where he has control over his cursed energy and a simple domain being able to weaken Sukuna's slashes to this extent is pretty impressive, and even Sukuna himself states it, that this isn't just Yuji who actually improved, it was all of them. We get more of a breakdown, but this time it isn't coming from Sukuna. It's actually Kusakabe who reveals more information about Sukuna's curse technique, saying that he didn't actually get hit by the World Cutter or any of the atomic slashes. The reason being is it's still speculative on the part of Kusakabe, but given how Jujutsu Kaisen is as a story, I wouldn't be shocked if Kusakabe's deductions don't end up playing a decent role in the story moving forward, in that they're important enough that they might actually be right on the money. Kusakabe wonders if maybe Sukuna couldn't do this because it might have something like a requirement like a binding vow, or it might be something as simple as there's a massive amount of curse energy required to get the full extent of the damage. When you think about it, without having the knowledge at this point of whether or not Kusakabe's assessment is correct, Kusakabe's guesses are pretty logical, and it lines up with what Angel basically planned. Should Gojo lose to Sukuna, which we all know that he did, they have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take on Sukuna and defeat him, which is why the plan was set in place for Yuta to clean up the aftermath of Kenjaku versus Takaba and then rush back over to assist him in fighting against Sukuna, all while Hikari handles the battle with Urarame. Sukuna is still recovering from his battle with Gojo, and the fact that he's even in his Heian era form is something that we can take as a sign that the effects of the Gojo battle, they're still wearing down on him and forcing him to dig deeper into his bag of tricks as the fight rages on. What's also interesting here is that Gege adds further clarification on Sukuna's powers, almost as if to say he's clearing up any misconceptions that might actually come from the battles that are coming in the future, which is really smart. We just came off of Sukuna versus Gojo, which was this epic battle that had everybody holding their breath week after week. It might go down as a top 15 Shonen Jump battle of all time. And we just came off of Sukuna versus Kashimo, which it was short. It still lived up to the hype by telling us that cleave changes the strength of attacks based off of the target itself. It's going to clear up any confusion in regards to the scaling for anyone who isn't actually paying attention to the story. It's a bit of an info dump. But again, it's needed so we don't go through another period of fans calling Sukuna a fraud. Like, it should already be common knowledge based off of the presentation that we've had in the manga, but the fact that Gege is directly spelling it out for us means that someone at Shueisha probably and likely felt that having these powers with a character like Sukuna who just acts more than he explains, it might be something that needs more clarity as we move into this final arc. Speaking of clarity itself, that flaming arrow that Sukuna used against Jogo, it does get mentioned here with Kusakabe trying to figure out why it hasn't been used yet, which can only mean that at some point it's getting used again, because the whole time that this dude was fighting against Gojo, Sukuna never thought to use that ability, because what we're seeing here is clearly a Chekhov's gun. That arrow is coming back. Gege is just waiting for the right moment to use this arrow in a clash. However, in order to speed things along, we move away from that info dump and we get back into the action. Because while Kusakabe is distracting Sukuna, Choso comes in clutch with a sneak attack, and you quickly see that the Jujutsu High and Angel's plan is actually being thrust into action, which is that this was never going to be a 1 versus 1 battle or a 2 versus 1 battle. They're all going for it. They're just full-blown jumping Sukuna with the intention of getting the win by any means necessary, and it's a high testament to the strength of Sukuna even while fatigued. They know they can't beat him 1-on-1 or even 3-on-1 or 4-on-1, but the more bodies that they can throw at this dude over the course of the battle, and the more strategically they try to take down Higurama and Kenjaku prior to everyone jumping Sukuna, they have a chance to win, because Gojo, while he is clearly cut in half, he also managed to wear down Sukuna to a point where they at least have a chance, because when you fight against someone as skilled and powerful as Gojo, there's no way you don't walk out that fight at least at the bare minimum half as strong as you were before. Yet if things were actually that easy, there wouldn't be any real conflict. And with Sukuna, you know it's never going to be easy just to defeat him. Sukuna smells the attack coming from Choso and immediately takes him out, adding to another body of the long list of Sukuna victims. We don't get an answer as if this is the final act for Choso, which, wow, if Sukuna just one-shot this guy, I don't think any of us would be shocked, but if Choso goes out in one shot, sheesh. Meanwhile, the Sukuna victims, they just keep lining up. This time we have Ino pulling up, wielding Nanami's blade, and somewhere Nanami fans are tearing up because Mr. Overtime, he might be a Mahito victim, he might have never gone to Malaysia, whereas Mei Mei was able to go, but he's still being made relevant to the story, and he left a strong enough of an impact when he was in the story that even Sukuna remembers his contributions. He remembers exactly what this blade is. However, when Sukuna is hit by the attack, he basically takes no damage, and this is huge. So for comparison, when Mahito was first hit by that blade, we saw the level of damage that it did to Mahito, but here Sukuna basically goes, wow, that actually hurt, but he's basically tanking the attack like it's nothing and proceeds to rock Ino afterwards, further building up Sukuna to be a beast, all while Nanami is left relevant to the story since it appears that his curse technique is living inside of that sword. This leads us to seeing more the desperation of the remaining fighters, because they realize while Sukuna is opening up a big can of whoop ass on them, that they can't basically afford to leave Higuruma alone, because that sword of his is their only way to take down Sukuna. And when we get the flashback, we learn that Yuji is so desperate in this battle for a really big reason. When Higuruma uses that blade on Sukuna, it will only kill Sukuna. It won't actually kill Megami, since Judgment can differentiate between the multiple souls in the same body, which now we're seeing the backdoor way that Gege is going to bring Megami back in the story at some point, which I think it's in a way that it's actually good writing, because it doesn't break any laws of the universe. It doesn't rely on the power of friendships. This is simply something that's already established, and it can be explained in a way to where it doesn't feel like a retcon. However, it's worth noting this could be a red herring, because Yuji was given a book on souls and he did spend a month training during that time skip. So if Higuruma does fall in battle, this might be one of those situations where Sukuna feels like he's invincible and he ends up being taken down by Yuji and that new power of his in an effort effort to save Megumi. We didn't get that panel of Yuji and Kusekabe during that 1 month of training where we see them in the dojo training for nothing. It's like Sukuna's arrow. This thing is a Chekhov's gun waiting to go off at the right moment. This leads to Sukuna firing off another attack, and if Higuruma wasn't already a target for Sukuna, he just got an even bigger target because Higuruma on the spot managed to instinctually use domain amplification to survive the attack, which leads to Sukuna complimenting him on his skill as a sorcerer despite him only being one for a short period of time. While it does look like we're getting closer to the end of Higuruma as a character, the way that he's developing at this rapid rate does make you wonder if he does survive. Could he have actually gone as far as a jujutsu sorcerer like Gojo or Sukuna if he was given a couple years to train?